Southeast Asian Peninsula summarized. First off, I'm not going to include the Kra Isthmus, which includes parts of Malaysia and Singapore, because that's kind of like a separate thing. And also, if I include Malaysia, then I'm going to have to hop over to Borneo, which has the other part of Malaysia, and then I'm going to have to talk about Brunei, and then Indonesia, and then we're going to get off topic. So just the main peninsula. First of all, they're all members of ASEAN, which is the largest political and economic bloc in the region. First, let's talk about who's related to who. Starting with Thailand and Laos, these two are basically siblings. They can even understand each other mostly when they talk to each other. The only difference is that they had a little bit of different upbringings, but they get each other. Vietnam and Cambodia are very distant cousins. It's just Vietnam. They had very different upbringings. Vietnam got more Chinese influenced. Cambodia got more Indosphere influenced. They've had a lot of fighting with each other in the past, but technically they're long distant cousins. Whereas the people of Myanmar are very distant cousins of the Tibetan people found in the Tibetan plateau of what is now China. These are the vast Buddhist majority countries, mostly under the Theravada branch. Whereas Vietnam and Laos, although they do have Buddhism, their cultures are more focused on folk religious elements, and it's not uncommon to see syncretism. Back in the day, Thailand and Myanmar were called Siam and Burma. You've probably heard of those words like Siamese cats and Burmese pythons. Yeah, that's where they get their names from. And they were the biggest rivals. They were always fighting each other. They had so many wars, and they were always riding the elephants in the wars, which is honestly kind of badass. But that's besides the point. Whereas the Vietnamese and Cambodians have always had conflicts over the southern areas by the Mekong Delta. And of course, they also used the battle elephants. Later on, these three countries fell under French colonial rule as French Indochina, which by the way, that word is kind of stupid because it's just lazy. It's like, well, it's not India, it's not China. Let's just call it Indochina. Which is why today you can still see some of the French influence in certain areas like French signs in public. And Vietnam has those banh mi sandwiches, which uses French baguettes, and they're so good. I love them. They're so cheap on the streets of Vietnam. Whereas Burma or Myanmar fell under British rule. Originally it was under British India, and then eventually it just got its own like British Burma status. It even included the Andaman Islands, which were later given to India, even though it's closer to Myanmar. Whereas Thailand was sitting pretty as a buffer state that neither side would colonize so that they could stay away from each other, which made Laos feel like, bro, help. And then for a brief period of time, imperialist Japan took over everything. Vietnam has some current drama with China over the 9-dash line because China claims all of that, and there's the Parcel Islands that Vietnam claims, but China built a military base on one of them. Anyway, there's also so much other stuff going on, but that's kind of like just the basics you need to know.